Hi beauties, welcome to the part 2 of Chioma and Park Lee's story. So, let's do a quick recap into the first episode. Chioma, a proud Nigerian woman who left Lagos to chase her dreams, collided with Park Lee, literal Korean Mafia boss disguised as a CEO, spilled coffee all over his designer suit, told him his arrogance was showing, got fired, somehow got hired at his hotel, and then walked into a surrogacy clinic only to find out he's the client? And now she's actually considering carrying this man's child for money? If you're not subscribed yet, I need you to do that right now because this story is about to get even more unhinged, and I refuse to let you miss what happens next. Hit that subscribe button like your life depends on it. Now let's get into it. 36 hours after that catastrophic meeting at the fertility clinic, Seoul continued its usual rhythm, oblivious to the fact that Chioma Peters's entire world had been flipped upside down and set on fire. The city moved with its characteristic efficiency, people rushing to work, traffic flowing through Gangnam's pristine streets, neon signs flickering to life as evening approached. But inside Chioma's cramped studio apartment in Itaewon, time had stopped. She sat on her bed, surrounded by papers she couldn't afford to ignore. Rent notices printed on aggressive red paper. Her student loan statement from the University of Lagos, the numbers seeming to grow larger every time she looked at them. A message from her mother about medical bills that made Chioma's chest tight with guilt. And her phone, buzzing every few hours with a simple message from an unknown number that she knew belonged to him. TikTok miss trip and fall. That nickname. That infuriating, condescending nickname that somehow made her want to throw her phone across the room and laugh at the same time. Park Lee had a gift for getting under her skin in ways that should be illegal. Her roommate Jiwon had tried to help, bringing her tea and practicing her limited English to ask if Chioma was okay. But how could she explain this situation? Just considering becoming a surrogate for the terrifying mafia boss who owns half of Seoul and makes my life miserable for sport. Normal Tuesday things. She read the compensation figure again. Then again. The number didn't change. It was still enough to clear every debt, send money home for her mother's surgery, and have enough left over to maybe, just maybe, start the event planning business she'd dreamed about since university. Her grandmother, God rest her soul, had always said that sometimes the devil offers you exactly what you need just to see if you'll take it. Well, Chioma thought bitterly, Park Lee certainly qualified as a devil. 2 days after that clinic revelation, Chioma found herself back in the sterile, unnervingly calm offices of the Seoul Fertility Solutions Agency. This time, she'd come prepared, or at least she'd tried to prepare. She'd worn her most professional outfit, a cream-colored blouse and black slacks that screamed, "I am a serious person making serious decisions," even though inside, she felt like she was free-falling without a parachute. She'd made a list of questions on her phone. She'd practiced saying no in the mirror 17 times. She'd called her best friend back in Lagos who told her she was insane and then immediately asked how much money they were offering. And yet, walking into that consultation room, seeing Park Lee already there, lounging in his chair like he owned not just the room but the entire concept of oxygen, all her preparation evaporated like morning mist. He looked infuriatingly composed. Black suit today, perfectly tailored as always, his hair styled with that careless precision that probably took 30 minutes and cost more than her monthly rent. He was scrolling through his phone with one hand, the other holding a cup of what was probably obscenely expensive coffee. He didn't look up when she entered. Didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Just let her stand there, feeling awkward and angry in equal measure, until she finally cleared her throat. Then he looked up, and that smile, that dangerous, knowing smile spread across his face. Miss Trip and Fall. I was beginning to think you'd run back to Nigeria. Chioma sat down across from him with more force than necessary, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't run from anything. Unlike some people who hide behind lawyers and money. Is that what you think I'm doing? He set his phone down, giving her his full attention now, and somehow that was worse than being ignored. Hiding? Aren't you? This whole thing flying to Singapore because it's not legal here, secret clinics, NDAs thick enough to stop bullets. Sounds like hiding to me. Sounds like protection, he corrected, his voice dropping to that tone he used when he was done playing games. Protection for both of us. You think I want my business rivals knowing I'm having a child? You think I want every gold digger in Seoul thinking they have a chance? This isn't about shame, Miss Peters. It's about strategy. She hated that he'd used her actual name. Hated how it sounded in his voice. Almost respectful. She preferred the nickname. At least then she knew where she stood. And where do I fit in your strategy? The incubator, who happens to have opinions? Before he could answer, the door opened, and a medical assistant gestured for them to follow. They were led deeper into the building, away from the pleasant waiting areas with their soft music and calming artwork, into a private consultation suite that felt more like a corporate boardroom than a medical facility. The door sealed with a quiet click that sounded far too final. Automatic blinds hummed down, blocking out the Seoul skyline and the rest of the world with it. A doctor entered moments later, a middle-aged Korean woman with intelligent eyes and the sort of calm, measured demeanor that suggested she'd facilitated arrangements far more complicated than this one. She carried a tablet and wore a smile that was probably meant to be reassuring but just made Chioma's anxiety spike higher. She sat down across from them, placed her tablet on the glass desk between them, and folded her hands with practiced professionalism. So, to clarify the timeline and logistics, she began, her English crisp and clear. Initial consultations and all medical screenings will be completed here in Seoul. However, the actual embryo transfer procedure will take place at our partner facility in Singapore. The initial preparation, hormone treatments, and the insemination itself will all be completed offshore. Singapore, Chioma repeated slowly, the word feeling strange in her mouth. Why Singapore specifically? The doctor's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes, a momentary hesitation that told Chioma everything she needed to know. Timing and regulatory flexibility. Mr. Park's medical team has an established relationship with the Singapore facility. It's quite common for international clients seeking discretion. Discretion, Chioma echoed, then turned to Park Lee with one eyebrow raised. That's an interesting word for illegal. Not illegal, he said evenly, no trace of defensiveness in his tone. Different regulations. South Korea has specific restrictions regarding surrogacy arrangements. Singapore's medical framework allows for more flexibility in certain circumstances. We're not breaking any laws, Miss Peters. We're simply choosing which laws to follow. How convenient for you, Chioma shot back. Must be nice to just pick and choose your legality. The doctor cleared her throat delicately, drawing their attention back. The Singapore clinic is world-class, truly. Some of the finest fertility specialists in Asia. You'll receive exceptional care throughout the entire process. Park Lee leaned forward slightly, his eyes never leaving Chioma's face. You'll be flown on a private jet. No commercial terminals, no crowds, no photographers. The best medical team money can buy. Complete anonymity throughout the entire procedure. This isn't about cutting corners, Miss Peters. It's about ensuring everything goes perfectly. Anonymity from who exactly? Chioma crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she couldn't quite suppress. The press? Your business associates? Your other women? One eyebrow rose slowly, and despite the tension, she saw genuine amusement flicker across his features. Other women? Miss Trip and Fall, you wound me. I'm a very busy man. I barely have time for one woman complicating my life, let alone multiples. Don't flatter yourself, Chioma snapped. I'm not jealous. I'm practical. If this arrangement becomes public knowledge, if your enemies or business rivals or whoever decides to use this against you, I'm the one whose face ends up on the news. Nigerian woman, foreign worker on a visa, caught up in scandal with powerful Korean businessman. Do you understand what that would do to my life? To my family's reputation back home? His expression sobered immediately, the mockery draining from his features. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but absolutely certain. From everybody. The anonymity is from everybody, including anyone who might think they can get to me through you. I have enemies, Miss Peters. Real ones. People who would very much enjoy hurting me, and the easiest way to hurt someone like me is through the people connected to them. This arrangement stays secret because it keeps you safe as much as it protects me. Do you understand? The weight of his words settled over Chioma like a heavy blanket. She'd known, abstractly, that Park Lee was dangerous, that his business empire straddled the line between legitimate and criminal, that he had connections to organizations that polite society pretended didn't exist. But hearing him acknowledge it so plainly, seeing the cold calculation in his eyes as he discussed enemies and protection strategies, made it viscerally real in a way that terrified her. "I can say no," she said quietly, more to remind herself than to inform him. "I can still walk away from this." "You can," he agreed without hesitation. "But you won't." The certainty in his voice should have made her angry, but instead it just made her tired. Because he was right, and they both knew it. The compensation figure was too large. Her debts were too overwhelming. Her mother needed surgery. Her dreams needed funding. Pride was expensive, and Chioma couldn't afford it right now. The doctor, sensing that the moment of decision was approaching, cleared her throat again and tapped her tablet screen. "Perhaps we should discuss the medical timeline and requirements? Ms. Peters, if you decide to proceed, there will be a preparatory phase before the actual transfer. You'll need to undergo hormone treatments for approximately 2 weeks to prepare your body for pregnancy. These treatments come with potential side effects that you should be aware of: headaches, nausea, dizziness, mood fluctuations, fatigue. Some patients experience fainting episodes, though that's less common." "Fainting episodes," Chioma repeated, latching onto that detail. "So I could just randomly pass out?" "It's not typical, but it's a possibility we need to prepare for. Your hormone levels will be carefully monitored and adjusted to minimize adverse reactions. You'll have regular check-ins with the medical team, and we'll be watching for any concerning symptoms." Chioma turned to Park Lee, her expression challenging. "And if I do faint, do I just hit the floor, or is someone actually going to catch me?" His response was immediate, delivered with that infuriating confidence. "I'll catch you. It's my marble floor, after all. I can't have you damaging the expensive materials."
She wanted to throw something at him.
"You're absolutely impossible. You've said that before, miss trip and fall. Multiple times now, actually. It's starting to lose its impact through repetition." "Stop calling me that," she said through gritted teeth. "Then earn a new nickname," he countered smoothly. The doctor was watching this exchange with barely concealed fascination, probably wondering what sort of disaster she'd gotten herself involved in facilitating. Before the argument could escalate further, she interjected smoothly. "Shall we discuss the contractual terms and conditions?" Chioma took a deep breath, pulling herself together and focusing on what mattered. "If I agree to this, and that's a massive if, I have conditions. Non-negotiable conditions." Park Lee leaned back in his chair, that trademark confidence radiating from him.
"Speak."
"My debts, all of them, cleared completely before any procedure happens. Student loans, credit cards, the money I owe my landlord, everything. I want documentation showing zero balances. And after the birth, seed capital for my own business. Real money, not some token amount that won't actually accomplish anything." "Define your own business," he said, and he was actually taking her seriously now, arms folded but expression attentive. "What exactly are you planning?" "Events and hospitality," Chioma said, lifting her chin. "Corporate events, weddings, cultural celebrations, product launches. I have a degree in business administration from the University of Lagos. I have hotel experience now, thanks to you making my life difficult. I know what I'm doing, I just need capital to start properly." He considered this for a long moment, and Chioma could practically see the calculations happening behind those sharp eyes. Cost-benefit analysis, risk assessment, potential return on investment. Finally, he nodded once. "Agreed. Stipend begins immediately. Paid weekly to cover your living expenses during preparation and pregnancy. Seed capital transferred within 30 days of successful birth. Housing costs covered for the entire term of the arrangement. Anything else?" "No cameras in my living space," Chioma continued, emboldened by his agreement. "No security guards watching me sleep. No random medical staff barging in at 3 in the morning because they decided they need to check something. I need privacy. I need spaces that are actually mine. Park Lee glanced at the doctor, then back to Chioma. Security cameras in public areas only, for your protection as much as mine. Medical access limited to licensed professionals with scheduled appointments. They knock first. Every medical interaction gets documented in your file for transparency. That acceptable? And no, Chioma paused, searching for the right words. No, you belong to me nonsense. I'm not your property. I'm not some possession you can control. His eyes locked onto hers, and suddenly the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. That's non-negotiable. For the duration of this arrangement, you are under my protection, which means you follow my security protocols. You belong to me until this child is safely born. That's not about ownership, Miss Peters. That's about keeping you alive. Chioma scoffed, anger flaring hot in her chest. That's not fair. You're just a controlling, arrogant bully who gets off on intimidating people. I know, he said simply, and had the audacity to smile. And I'm very good at it. Add it to your list of complaints if it makes you feel better, but that clause stays in the contract. No dating restrictions, Chioma shot back, moving on since she wasn't going to win that battle. You don't get to control my personal life or who I spend time with. Denied, he said immediately. Absolutely denied. No dating, no casual relationships, no complications. You want to know why? Because the second some photographer catches you with another man, every news outlet in Seoul will start speculating about whose baby you're carrying. My enemies will start connecting dots. Your face will be plastered across every tabloid and gossip site. Is that what you want? Because I can promise you it's not what I want. She hated that he had a point.
Fine.
But you don't control what I eat, what I wear, what I read, or how I breathe. I'm not your puppet. Dietary and medical compliance are non-negotiable, he countered immediately. You're carrying my child, which means you eat properly, sleep properly, and follow every medical guideline to the letter. Everything else? His hand waved dismissively. Wear whatever you want. Read whatever you want. I don't care about your fashion choices or literary preferences. Chioma pulled out her phone, checking the list of demands she'd made during her sleepless night. And a charitable donation. There's a girls' technology education program in Kano, in northern Nigeria. They teach coding, software development, and digital skills to young women who can't afford formal education or university. I want a substantial donation made to that program in my grandmother's name. Something shifted in Park Lee's expression, a flicker of what might have been respect crossing his features.
Done. How much?
Enough to fund operations for a full year. Enough for scholarships for at least 20 girls, maybe more. My grandmother believed education was the only real way to break cycles of poverty. This matters to me. Consider it handled, he said simply. I'll have my people contact the program directly. Anything else? No stalking me at work, Chioma continued. No more petty punishments for imaginary mistakes. No more threatening to fire me every 5 minutes over nothing. If I'm doing this, if I'm actually agreeing to this insane arrangement, that behavior stops immediately. But it's my favorite hobby, he protested, and despite everything, despite the tension and fear and absolute insanity of the situation, Chioma almost laughed. Add it to the contract or I walk, she said firmly. He studied her for a long moment, dark eyes searching her face for something she couldn't identify. Then he nodded once. Fine. Added. No more workplace harassment as you so dramatically call it. Later that evening, after hours of additional discussion and preliminary paperwork and medical questions that made Chioma's head spin, she was back in her tiny apartment trying to process everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed with a message from the agency's official number. Please review the attached NDA and preliminary terms. Digital signature required within 12 hours, or the offer expires. Her hands shook as she opened the document. It was extensive, dozens of pages of legal language that made her eyes glaze over. Confidentiality clauses that could ruin her if violated. Medical procedures explained in clinical detail. Financial arrangements broken down to the last one. Penalty fees for breach of contract that made her stomach drop. Security protocols that felt both protective and suffocating. It was overwhelming. It was terrifying. It was also more money than she'd ever seen offered for anything in her entire life. Tick-tock, miss trip and fall. The voice came from directly behind her, low and amused, and Chioma spun around so fast she nearly dropped her phone. Park Lee stood in the storage area doorway, because of course he did. Of course he'd followed her. Of course, he couldn't just give her space to think and breathe and make the most important decision of her life without his shadow looming over her. "This is a staff area," she snapped, anger making her voice sharp. "You can't just walk in here whenever you feel like it." "I own the hotel," he reminded her calmly, stepping inside and letting the door close behind him. "Every area is my area, technically speaking. Make your decision faster, or I'll assume it's a no and find someone else by tomorrow morning." That shouldn't have stung. This was a business arrangement, nothing personal, just a transaction between two people who could barely stand each other. But somehow, the casual way he said it, like she was completely replaceable, like these past weeks of verbal warfare and strange almost moments meant absolutely nothing, it hurt more than she expected. "I haven't said no," she called after him as he turned to leave. He paused in the doorway, not turning around. "Then don't waste my time saying nothing." That night, alone in her apartment with G1 already asleep in the adjacent room, Chioma read the contract 3 complete times. Every clause, every condition, every promise and threat wrapped in impenetrable legal language. The NDA that could destroy her reputation if she violated it. The wellness coverage that was actually surprisingly comprehensive for something so morally questionable. The Singapore clause that still made her uneasy, but she understood the reasoning now. The monitoring conditions that felt invasive and protective in equal measure. Weekly medical check-ins. A dedicated driver during treatment phases. A medical team on 24-hour call. Restrictions on travel, on alcohol consumption, on basically everything, but also protections. Liability coverage. Health insurance better than anything she'd ever had. Emergency contacts. Legal representation, if needed. She thought about every door that had slammed in her face since coming to Korea full of hope and ambition. Every job application ignored because her degree was from Lagos instead of Seoul. Every apartment viewing where landlords suddenly remembered they'd already rented to someone else the moment they saw her face. Every time she'd sent money home to help her family and then lived on instant noodles for a week to make her budget work. Every time her mother called about medical expenses and Chioma had to pretend everything was fine, that she was thriving in Korea, that the dream was working exactly as planned. At 2:47 in the morning, with tears she refused to acknowledge streaming down her face, Chioma signed the NDA. Her finger hovered over the submit button for a full 60 seconds while she second-guessed everything. Then she pressed it. The confirmation screen appeared. Document received and processed. Further instructions will follow within 24 hours. She barely slept, kept awake by anxiety and second thoughts and G1's worried questions that Chioma couldn't fully answer. Dawn came too quickly, gray light filtering through her thin curtains, and she dragged herself out of bed feeling like she'd made either the best or worst decision of her entire life. When she arrived at the private clinic for the pre-screening appointment, exhausted and running on nothing but anxiety and instant coffee, he was already there. Of course he was. Park Lee stood in the waiting area with a cup of dark coffee, his suit immaculate as always, his expression unreadable as he watched her approach with dark circles under her eyes. The nurse called her name, and Chioma stood on shaky legs, preparing to walk into the examination area alone. But Park Lee stood too, moving to follow her like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You don't have to hover," she said tiredly, too exhausted for their usual verbal sparring. "I can handle a simple blood draw by myself." "I don't hover," he corrected mildly. "I supervise." "That's not better," she muttered. "That's actually significantly worse." He ignored her protest, speaking quietly to the nurse instead, his voice low enough that Chioma almost didn't catch it. "Make sure she eats something substantial after the blood draw. Something warm." She probably skipped breakfast again. "I didn't skip breakfast," Chioma protested, but her traitorous stomach chose that exact moment to growl loudly enough to be heard across the waiting room. His tiny knowing smile was absolutely infuriating. Noted, he said simply, and somehow made those two syllables sound smug. After the blood work and the initial physical examination, and what felt like 100 invasive questions about her medical history going back to childhood, Chioma emerged from the examination room exhausted, slightly dizzy from having blood drawn on an empty stomach, and emotionally wrung out. She found Park Lee waiting in the private lounge area, and before she could say anything or protest or remind him that she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself, he slid a covered dish across the table toward her. Rice porridge with ginger, still steaming gently. A cup of honey citron tea beside it, the kind that settled upset stomachs. "I can buy my own food," she said, but she sat down anyway, suddenly intensely aware of how hungry she actually was. "But you didn't," he pointed out reasonably. "You came here on an empty stomach after signing life-altering legal documents at 3 in the morning, and you thought you'd just power through on stubbornness alone. That's not strategic, Miss Peters. That's foolish." She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her pride and her independence, but the porridge smelled amazing and she was too tired for battle. After a beat of silence, she said softly, "Thank you." Something shifted in his expression, became less mocking and more genuine. "You're welcome." Back at the hotel later, during a rare quiet moment between events when Chioma was reviewing table assignments for an upcoming corporate dinner, Park Lee appeared at the service station where she was working. He didn't announce himself, didn't say anything at first, just studied her with that intense gaze that made her feel like a specimen being examined under laboratory conditions.
What?
She finally asked without looking up from her tablet. "Do I have something on my face?" "Your hotel schedule is brutal," he said instead of answering. 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer when there are major events. Reduce your hours during the preparation phase. You're going to need rest. "I can't afford to," Chioma said automatically. "The stipend hasn't started yet, and I still have bills." "That's exactly what the stipend is for," he pointed out. "Did you actually read the contract, or did you just skim it looking for trap clauses?" "I read every single line," she said defensively. "There were a lot of lines. It took hours." "There are more coming," he warned. "In a few days, my legal team will have the full wellness consultant agreement ready. That's your public-facing cover story, in case anyone asks questions about why you're suddenly spending time around me." "Wellness consultant," Chioma repeated skeptically. "What does that even mean?" "Whatever we want it to mean," he said with a shrug. "Officially, you'll be hired to handle scheduling optimization, nutritional planning, personal routine management. Vague enough to be believable, specific enough to explain your presence. No one will question it." A few days later, Chioma found herself in Park Lee's penthouse conference room, which was exactly as intimidating as she'd imagined. The space screamed wealth and power, from the floor-to-ceiling windows offering impossible views of Seoul, to the minimalist furniture that probably cost more than a car, to the two lawyers sitting across the massive glass table looking crisp and professional and slightly nervous about whatever was about to happen. "Ms. Peters," the first lawyer began, sliding a thick document across the table toward her. "This is the Wellness Consultant Agreement. Your official public duties will be intentionally generic and vague. Scheduling optimization, nutritional planning oversight, personal routine management. Nothing specific enough to invite detailed questions." The second lawyer jumped in smoothly. "We also strongly recommend a temporary residence arrangement. A furnished suite in Park Tower during treatment windows and recovery periods. It's primarily for medical monitoring purposes, but also for privacy and security." "Absolutely not," Chioma said immediately, her voice sharp with automatic refusal. "I'm not moving in with a man who still calls me Miss Tripp and Fall like it's my legal name." Park Lee, who'd been quiet until now, leaned forward slightly. "It's not cohabitation in any traditional sense. Different floors entirely. Different entrances. My personal physician maintains an office in the building and will be on call for any medical needs. Fewer witnesses, fewer security risks. If rumors start circulating, if anyone connects the dots between us, everything burns. You understand that, right? Or we could just hide less," Chioma challenged. "All this elaborate secrecy, doesn't it just make everything seem more suspicious?" His expression was measured and controlled. "This is not a romance novel, Miss Peters. This is a business arrangement with very real security concerns attached. My world is not safe. People get hurt. I will not let you become collateral damage, but that means you follow the established protocols without arguing at every turn. It's also not your personal dictatorship, she shot back, holding his gaze even though her heart was pounding. I keep my current apartment. I'm not giving up my independence or my own space. But fine, during the actual treatment preparation and immediate recovery after the birth, I'll stay in your building if the security is really that important. Separate floor, like you said. Different entrance. But you stop threatening to fire me from the hotel every other day. That stops right now. One of his lawyers made a sound like he'd swallowed something the wrong way. Park Lee's lips twitched with barely suppressed amusement. You really do enjoy removing all my favorite hobbies. Add it to the contract, Chioma insisted, not backing down. He looked at his lawyers, both of whom were watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match. Add it. And include comprehensive travel provisions. Private terminal access for all flights, no commercial airports where she could be photographed. My security team handles all logistics personally. She doesn't speak to press under any circumstances, doesn't post on social media about anything that could be connected to this arrangement, doesn't do anything that might expose our agreement to public scrutiny. Then he looked back at her, and for the first time since this entire surreal situation began, he used her actual name. Not Miss Trip and Fall. Not Miss Peters. Just her name, spoken quietly and with something that almost sounded like genuine concern. Chioma, if you do this with me, I'll keep you safe. That's a promise. From everyone? She asked, even quieter. Or just from you? He didn't answer immediately. Maybe the silence was an answer in itself. That evening, another message arrived from the agency. Singapore clinic confirmed and scheduled. Both parties approved for procedure. Pending final medical clearance, departure scheduled for 72 hours from now. Please confirm acceptance to proceed. 72 hours. 3 days to change absolutely everything about her life. 3 days before she got on a private plane and crossed a line she could never uncross. 3 days to second-guess and panic and talk herself out of this completely insane decision. Chioma stared at her phone for a long time, thinking about her mother back in Lagos, her grandmother's memory and legacy, the dreams she'd had when she first came to Korea full of hope and determination to make something of herself. She typed one word. Yes. 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then his response came through. Driver picks you up at 7 a.m. sharp. Pack light. Essentials only. Passport, obviously. Be ready on time. She typed back, fingers moving across the screen with more confidence than she felt.
I'm always on time.
His response was immediate and predictable. We'll see about that. 2 days later, well past midnight when Seoul had finally gone quiet, a sleek black car pulled up outside Chioma's apartment building. She'd barely slept, kept awake by a chaotic mix of nerves and second thoughts and Ji-won's increasingly worried questions that Chioma still couldn't fully answer, without violating her NDA. The driver, a quiet man in an expensive suit who was definitely more bodyguard than chauffeur based on his build and the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, took her single small suitcase without comment and opened the rear door with practiced efficiency. The drive to the private terminal was surreal, passing through empty Seoul streets at an hour when the city finally paused to breathe. They went past neighborhoods she'd come to know during her months here, past the hotel where she worked, past the corporate building where she'd first collided with Park Lee and set this entire chain of events in motion. They bypassed the main Incheon International Airport entirely, turning instead into a private access road that led to a sleek building she'd never even noticed before despite passing the airport dozens of times. This was how the truly wealthy traveled, she realized. Separate terminals, separate security protocols, separate everything that kept them isolated from ordinary people and ordinary problems. The private jet waited under spilled moonlight, all elegant curves and expensive materials, exactly the kind of aircraft she'd only seen in movies about lifestyles she couldn't imagine living. Chioma's stomach twisted with nerves as she climbed the stairs, each step feeling like crossing into a different world entirely. Inside, the cabin was everything she'd expected, and somehow still more. Cream leather seats that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Polished wood accents. Soft lighting that was gentle and flattering. A flight attendant materialized to offer her water, fresh juice, champagne if she wanted it. A silver tray held fresh fruit arranged like artwork too beautiful to disturb. Chioma didn't touch any of it. Her stomach was too twisted with anxiety. She made her way to the seat farthest from where Park Lee was already settled. Working on his laptop like this was just another ordinary business trip, like they weren't about to fly to another country for one of the most insane arrangements she'd ever heard of or agreed to. He didn't look up as the plane began taxiing down the runway. Didn't acknowledge her presence as they accelerated and lifted smoothly into the night sky, Seoul's lights spreading below them like scattered diamonds across black velvet. He just kept working, typing occasionally, reviewing documents, making notes in margins, completely absorbed in whatever business couldn't wait even during an international flight to facilitate his future child's conception. Chioma pressed her forehead against the cool window, watching clouds pass beneath them as they climbed higher into darkness. When they finally leveled out, cruising over dark ocean towards Singapore and whatever waited for them there, she spoke to the glass itself, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of engines. "I'm not doing this for you." She didn't expect him to respond. His laptop was still open, his attention apparently completely focused on whatever was on his screen. But then his voice came through the quiet cabin, surprisingly gentle.
"I'm not asking you to."
"I'm just asking you to do it right." She turned her head just enough to see him in her peripheral vision. He'd finally closed his laptop, was looking out his own window at the darkness beyond and the stars above. In profile, without that perpetual mocking smile, he looked different somehow. Younger maybe. More human. Almost vulnerable, though she'd never say that out loud because he'd probably threaten to fire her again, out of pure spite. "What if I can't?" she asked the window, voicing the fear that had been growing in her chest. "What if I fail at this? What if something goes wrong?" "You won't fail," he said, and his certainty was absolute and unshakable. "You're too stubborn to fail, mistrip and fall. It's one of your more annoying qualities, but it'll serve you well in this." Despite everything, despite the fear and anxiety and complete insanity of this situation, she almost smiled. Says the man who literally made tormenting me his personal hobby. Made it my hobby? He actually sounded offended by the characterization. "You walked into my life, literally crashed into me, insulted my very expensive suit, challenged me in front of my entire staff, and refused to back down even when threatened with deportation. You made yourself my hobby, Miss Peters. I'm just responding to the situation you created." She did turn then, meeting his eyes directly across the cabin space between them. "Your suit was genuinely ugly." The coffee stains were an improvement to the overall aesthetic. He laughed, real and genuine and unguarded, and for just a moment the constant tension between them eased into something that wasn't quite friendship, but wasn't quite war either. Something undefined and unexpected and far more dangerous than either of them wanted to acknowledge or examine too closely. The plane banked slightly, beginning its gradual descent towards Singapore's glittering coastline. Below them, highways ribboned through darkness, lights marking the boundaries between water and land, between what had been and what was coming. Chioma watched it all, this new country, this new chapter, this utterly insane decision she'd made that couldn't be unmade now. And beside her, separated by expensive leather seats and unspoken agreements and mountains of contracts, Park Lee watched too, both of them flying towards something neither could fully control. So that's where we're leaving them. Chioma and Park Lee, 30,000 feet above the ocean, heading to Singapore for a procedure that's going to change absolutely everything. If you think this situation is complicated now, just wait until next episode when they actually have to spend extended time together outside of their usual warfare. Things are about to get so much more intense, and you're not going to want to miss a single moment. Make sure you're subscribed because, I promise you, the next episode is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment right now telling me if you think Chioma made the right choice, or if she's walking into a disaster she can't escape from. And while you're at it, Let me know how you'll W equals rate this episode on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'll see you in part 3 where things get even more complicated than you can possibly imagine. To be continued.